and we're here today with Angela Denise Davis from ZAMI NOBLA. I just got the pronunciation right on that. Hi, Angela. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing really well. I'm in the middle of a shift of houses, so that's a little bit stressful, but otherwise I'm good.
Oh,
So I thought we'd jump right into it. And I'd ask you, what is your story? Now, that's a very broad question, and you can, answer it however you want. What is your
what is
story?
my story? Yes, there are many different stories in this person of 51, almost 52 years on this planet. I think my story rests largely in the fact that I was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, which is the smack dab Midwest of the United States. And I grew up there and then went south to college to Clark Atlanta University. And at that point in time, the world opened to me because I had a chance to really look at where and how I wanted to spend my life. I understood that a large part of my working life would involve ministry. So from college, I wound my way to divinity school, Vanderbilt Divinity School, and I had a profound loss of vision while I was serving as the admissions director there. Once I graduated from Vanderbilt, I came back later as the admissions director, and I had a profound loss of vision after taking some students on a global education opportunity in Southern Africa. And 3 months after I came back from that trip, I started having some sensations, and within 6 months, I was legally blind. And from that point, my life really opened up, and also went through a distillation in a very interesting way, because I had to refine work, refine life, and it ultimately led me to the place where I am now, of helping people understand their spiritual journey, their musical journey through the gift of ukulele and the joy of music and the vibration of sound. And that's kind of the long and short of my larger story.
It's given me so many points. I've just been jotting stuff down, and there was an interruption by Kat just now. But I'm going to come back to, you are an ordained minister. Okay. That's, from what I understand, that's very different from what it is in our context. I don't think that ordained ministers as women are a thing in India. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? And because religion and queerness usually have very violent or dramatic intersections, how did that come to be?
So when I was a young girl of 6, I had what we call a call experience, which was my sitting in my church with my minister at the time, and he said, "Well, Angela, what do you want to do?" It was just him and I. My mom was downstairs with some other church women doing work, and I was a little kid wandering through the sanctuary, and he sat down and had a conversation with me, and I said, "I want to preach just like you." So I knew at a small age that this power of the spoken word, of being able to give voice to gospel, to good news, to information that could change lives, was something that I wanted to do and felt within my person a calling to do. And I went to divinity school, like I said, at Vanderbilt Divinity School. And after my education, I was ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. For us, that means that I had a religious body that recognized my call to ministry, that certified that I was properly educated, and that hooked me to that denomination. I'm no longer with that denomination, but I still maintain my ordination as a minister. And for me, that means I do a lot of preaching. I do spiritual direction with folks. I help people think about theological reflection. And I have routed ministry in the larger sense to be helping people use music as a way of getting in touch with their spirituality. So that's kind of the broad sense of how I function as an ordained minister.
And just to expand on that, I know that spirituality and music play a really important part in the work that you do. Tell me more about that and how it is working with people. Like, do you work with individuals or with groups? How does that work?
You know, when we think about music, we can, well, we probably can't remember it, but we know that even within the womb of our mother's belly, that
Right.
the rhythm of the heartbeat,
Hmm.
that the influence of other music that she's experiencing, we experience. So we come into this world with some idea of this eternal rhythm. And so for me, I think that the idea of getting truly connected with oneself is, first of all, recognizing that there is this eternal rhythm that we all share, and how we get back to that may be different for some people. I remember as a kid growing up in Kansas, just being in church and singing and being with my family. At family gatherings, we would sing, cleaning up, hearing music on the radio. So music in my life has always been a very strong influence. And when you think about music, there's always a story. There's always a narrative. So I like to say, where there's a song, there's a story. And for
Right.
me, helping people connect with the story of their lives through music is one way we do that. It happens when I'm working with an individual or a group, and I encourage them to practice, because the idea of having a daily practice is what makes you a better musician. But it's also that idea of practice and the discipline of doing something every day that is transformative. It shapes your life. So there's a spiritual impulse there. I'm also looking at engaging communities of faith or organizations who want to learn music together within their congregation or organization, to do that journey together as a way of building community and connecting with their impulse as an organization, as a congregation. So that's one way that I'm framing this as well. And I think that just the joy of every day sitting and experiencing music, and maybe getting up to a song or going to bed and listening to a song, or having a song that you sing every night to your child, or you sing prayers. I mean, there's many different ways of praying. And so music for me is a way of encompassing all of that.
You know, it's awesome because I've had such a different experience with music. I went to a Catholic school, so we were taught a lot of hymns, we were taught a lot of carols, and obviously there was a large emphasis on sounding like you can sing, right? I don't know what that means. I still don't. And I wasn't one of those who could sound like she could sing. And it was very like, why don't you stand there and let the rest of us do the thing right? And it never felt like a community activity. So I guess I'm wondering, how is this a community activity? Because music is it seems so predicated on the talent for it. And I know that's not true, but that's what most of us experience. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, that's unfortunate. That was your experience, and so many people, you're right, do experience that. I tell my students and folks in general, don't leave music to the professionals.
Mm,
Music is not something that is for the professionals. It's something that we each can do.
mm,
We all can make a joyful noise. We all can sing. We all can, in some ways, have vibrations course through our bodies. And I think some of the most welcoming communities are communities that understand it's not about having a chorus of trained and paid
mm,
professionals in your choir. It's really about people who come together and who practice
mm,
together as a choir or as an ensemble or what have you. And they come and they bring that performance for their congregation, for the community, and then it becomes something that is shared. I'm a big proponent of, certainly within the spiritual context, congregational singing,
mm,
which is the idea that no one owns the song. It really is about your showing up and being part of community and hearing that music course throughout that hall, that church, whatever that space is, that mosque, that synagogue, whatever it is allowing that sound to reverberate off of the walls. And so I just encourage people, don't leave music to the professionals. It is not something that only professionals can do. It's something we each can do.
mm.
And I just hope people will kind of revisit that. You know, as a kid, my sister would tell me, "Oh, you can't sing." And I listened to her because she has a beautiful voice and was just someone who was always appreciated for this just clear, beautiful, dynamic range that she had with her singing voice and speaking voice. So I was always, in her shadow, but I love singing. And it wasn't until, I turned 40 that I said, hoopspa, whatever. If she thinks I can't sing, that's fine, but I'm going to sing. And I started singing, and you can't shut me up now because I understand that it is something that is just so native
Mm,
to who we are
mm.
as living beings on this planet, and we need not leave that to the professionals.
Amen to that. I'm just going to repeat. Did you say you were 40 when you decided to not give a fuck about everyone else's opinion about your singing?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
that was about singing. It was about dancing.
right.
uh, because I love to dance, but I really didn't dance before 40. I remember
Mm,
dancing at my high school graduation
mm.
party after the graduation, and I walked the one dance I did. I walked off the floor. I was dancing with this guy named Chris, and I was so subconscious. Halfway through the dance, I left the song. Halfway through the song, I left the floor because it just didn't seem right. I remember a dance I went to in college.
Mm,
But outside of those two experiences, I never really danced in community. I think when I became 40 and I was just in the space, and it was a queer space
mm.
with other black lesbians, I didn't give a flying flip. I just danced and I enjoyed it. And people would say, "Who's that woman out there just dancing like that?" Well, it was me, because there was just such joy in movement. And I think that speaks to just the power of growing older
Mm,
and coming into your own sense of who you are as a person, learning to be free and not
mm.
care what other people think about you dancing, you're singing, what have you. That's the joy, I think, of coming into our own skin and being comfortable with who we are.
I think it gives me a lot of heart to hear you say that, because there is a very large narrative about, on a completely different note from what we are discussing, but there is a very large narrative about you do it when you're young. And then there is a point you reach that it is too late to do anything, right? And hence, and any effort you make after that is going to be, a little too late, too little too late.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
And
I thoroughly disavow that because, ZAMI NOBLA, the full
mm,
name of our organization, how we say it, ZAMI NOBLA, National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging, is about redefining aging and
mm,
understanding that as we grow older, we have all of these wonderful opportunities to experience things in a new way. And so aging then is a gift. It is not a burden. It is a blessing. So I just encourage people, whoever you are, how old you are, just to pick up something new and understand that every day you grow older, you have a different vantage point and you bring something new to that experience.
So, in this process of looking at aging as reaching a new vantage point on everything in life, how is that reflected in your career, if I may use the word, in the church? You were a very young person. If I get the timeline correct, the blindness didn't happen when you were in divinity school. So from there to now, how has that evolved? Your spiritual practice
Well,
and
yeah. The blindness happened when I was working in administration at the divinity school. I had,
okay.
and I should have clarified that more. I was a student from 1996 to 2000, and then I came back to the school in 2002 to work as the admissions director. Ministry, and I think probably because I went to Vanderbilt Divinity School, I had a broad sense of what ministry was. It wasn't the big M, and the work I do really is very broad. And yet I call myself and know myself to be a minister. And the work I do comes out of music. It comes out of contemplation and encouraging people to have places where they can sit and practice and hone into the vibrations of their lives. I never would have imagined that my ministry would be like this, in my early 50s. I when I was younger, I'm sure I had a very different trajectory in my head about where I would be as a minister and the type of work I would be doing. And I'd probably be connected to a church or a congregation, and it would be maybe in a pastoral role. But that's not at all where I've landed. And so I think that as I age, I allow myself to really sit with some of the most, some of the truest aspects of my person and how that lives out in ministry. For example, I tend to be kind of a loner and an introverted person who appreciates people, but I don't get my energy from people. And so for me, this whole idea of music and finding within the space of sound a place that I can create a vocational home as well as invite people to do the same really reflects on my sensibilities and what I most enjoy. But all of that is quite different. I never would have imagined that this would be the path that I would have taken in ministry through music and through teaching music and offering people new ways of thinking about developing a practice and being in practice in life.
I think it's wonderful, this idea of community forming around things you do as opposed to things you are. Like there is a whole imagery of ministerial work where it is about the persona, right? And as opposed to coming together and just doing something together, right? I also want to go back, like you spoke about how your younger self's trajectory, or your younger self wouldn't imagine that you would reach where you are right now. So like, what would you in a way say to your younger self at this point? What do you think your younger self was struggling with 18, 19, 20 while she was in divinity school?
Oh, my younger self was struggling with her own authenticity.
Okay.
I didn't come out until after. I didn't come out as a lesbian until after divinity school. I had some inkling in college that I was a lesbian, but I quickly buried that. And I buried it so well that I was surprised that it resurfaced 10 years later.
Wow.
I did such a good job with shoveling dirt that I had no idea that this would come back up, and then I'm like, oh, this is who you are. I would tell that younger self that you shouldn't be afraid to be fully acquainted with your person and to take the risks that life offers you in order to be fully who you are. I think I was so content with and concentrating on being the rule. I mean, following certain rules and being very circumscript in my stance in life and in ministry. And you have to do this, you have to be like this. That left no room for me as a young person to grow. And so I think that's very detrimental when you are young and you put yourself in a box, because that's not how things grow. You conform to that box as opposed to some other shape you would have been in life. And I think that's something that I really think about, and I say, well, we all are who we are to be, and yesterday made me who I am today. But it would be curious to know if I had taken advantage of some freedom to be more fully me, how my life would have been different. I don't belabor that thought, but it's just interesting.
I get that. I think you kind of mentioned the sense of something that's shining through now is through the truest aspects of your person. And how do you share that with people? I know that you do music and community spaces, but how does your authentic self, what is your everyday like? Should I break down that question?
How is my everyday? I think in the world in which we live, we have to really fight to be authentically ourselves. Because you turn on the television or you turn on the radio first thing in the morning and there's an ad that tells you need this in order to be fully you. You pick up a magazine and there's a picture of someone who's so incredibly thin, and the image has been photoshopped that no one could really be that image. But it tells you you're less than who you are or could ever be, because you don't fit that image. We are surrounded by toxic information that we hear from other people who challenge the way in which we show up in the world. So I think that for me, my everyday living and really all of our everyday living is about waking up and making the decision that today, I'm going to be fully present in this moment, fully present with all that the day offers and the day requires. And so I think that's part of my person, just settling in and trying to find the grounding and not pulling in other energy from the radio, the television, and making decisions about what I take in, because some things aren't encouraging for our authenticity. So I'm very clear that every day it's a work.
Right.
It is a practice.
Right.
Coming back to the place, sitting,
Right.
being present, and showing up and letting transformation happen, which it will do if we celebrate the power of showing up.
That's actually something so I come from a space where we practice theater for community. And that's something that we do, that we speak of a lot, this idea of just showing up, of this idea of holding space. And conceptually, they sound like very vague things, but I truly get what you are saying, this idea of practicing every day, of consciously making a choice to do it. So
Yes.
thank you for saying that. I want to go back. There are actually 2 points I want to like kind of go back to. One is whether once you did come out, uh, was there an effect? Did it affect the way you practiced your spiritual your ministry, or was there any was did things change with your ministry?
Um, yes, I think it did affect my vocation as a minister, because I wasn't within a denomination that was really open and affirming or welcoming to LGBTQ people. And I had to make a decision about, now that I know this is who I am, who do I tell? How do I form community? And for a large part, my community was the friends I had at the divinity school, colleagues, staff, students who had been through the program with me. That was a precious, rich community that sustained me. Shortly after coming out was when I began losing vision. And
Right,
so that complicated things, because then I had to uh, make the decision that you can't be blind and in the closet, because you'll never find your way out. That's what I would uh,
right,
joke around, and some people got it. Some people thought, "Oh, what did she say?" Uh, but it really was about the intersection of being lesbian, being a person with a disability, and all of the other different intersections I hold. That if I was going to be truly authentic, I had to be open about who I was and allow other people to get to know me so I could be in community, or I wouldn't find that community, certainly as a blind person. Um, so, that was a real, challenging time that um, caused me to pause as I was thinking
right.
about ministry and just career in general, because
Mm,
at that point I had to gain a whole new set of skills in order
right.
to be a blind person. You know, I spent 10 months in vocational rehabilitation,
Mm,
learning Braille, learning how to use adaptive technology, assistive technology, finding the emotional fortitude to come out in the world every day, just as a blind person,
right.
to travel in the world. So it took some years of working through all of that, um, that rehabilitation piece of my life because of the blindness. And then after that, I said, well, I want to go back and get another master's degree and do something in rehab counseling. And I went back to Georgia State, got a
Mm,
master's of rehabilitation counseling, and started at that point working with blind adults, helping them think about career opportunities and vocational training to help them get back on
right.
their career path. And I did that for a while, but I understood that that was not my true calling. It was
Mm,
not the thing that brought me the biggest amount of joy.
mm,
And ultimately, that thing was music, and teaching music, and helping people through the practice of music understand all the places that could open up to them if they practice
mm,
music.
mm. I want to get into this a little bit more because I think a lot of us are raised with the fear of perhaps chasing our joy because it means letting go of systems that we've grown up with, systems and communities that we've grown up with. And there is a loneliness that sets in when you make that decision, or when you're thinking of making that decision. And you spoke about that, about how the community that you had at the divinity school kind of had to fall away and you had to find a new community. And So I want to know a little bit more about what you did or didn't do to find that community.
Well, well, the community at the divinity school was the saving grace.
Hmm.
What happened was probably the community around my church and the community around non-divinity school related people fell away
Right.
because I think of the theological
Hmm.
issues that folks had with LGBTQ people.
Hmm.
Um, what I discovered was that there were people who came into my life um, when I opened myself up
Hmm.
that I did not know. I mean, some of these people were real strangers.
Hmm.
There was a woman who worked at the university, Vanderbilt University, and she had heard about me, and she made it a point to be, and she even had a business card
Hmm.
of being an angel, of helping
Aw.
people. That was her way of moving in the world, and
Hmm.
just a very sweet presence.
Hmm.
And so if I needed something, she was there. She took me once. I had a speaking engagement. She took me to that. She took me to lunch a few times and was just
Right.
really a wonderful person. And I had people like that who came into my life. And so I think part of really developing new communities when you're in a place of transformation or shifting
Hmm.
is you're first of all being willing to be open
Hmm.
to that new community, being open to having someone who may be different from you,
Hmm.
someone you may not know or not met before, to have that person come into your life.
Hmm.
Um, and so for me, I was in such a vulnerable state and needed a
Right.
lot of assistance at the time that any help was a blessing. And so folks like this woman who just were real angels
Hmm.
were wonderful to me, but it did involve opening yourself up. And I remember there was well, in Nashville, Tennessee, that's where Vanderbilt Divinity School is. In Nashville, there isn't a real open queer community, and certainly
Hmm.
when you begin to think about Black folks in Nashville,
Hmm.
and I knew that if I was ever going to meet any other queer Black people, I had to step out. And I had a friend who was straight, a white woman, who took me to my first Pride in Nashville, and she said,
Nice.
you just got to get out here, you got to meet people.
Hmm.
And she did that, and then I um I I followed up after that to go to a film festival,
Hmm.
and I took like an Uber or something there, and I remember it being late, and I was waiting for the Uber to pick me up, or some version, maybe it was the version of paratransit, which is a service for people with disabilities, to come
Hmm.
and pick me up. And it was getting later, and so there was a lesbian couple, who said, "Well, we'll take you home."
Hmm.
Because I had stuck my neck out to go to that film festival,
Hmm.
um, I met some really incredible people, but it was not without challenges and fear. Who am I going to meet here?
Hmm.
What type of experience is going to be? But they took me to dinner afterwards, and they took me home, and it was just neat getting to know them. So I would say you just have to be open to what life will present
Hmm.
you when you're looking for new communities.
And I think the openness is also about trying new things, but also like you spoke about the angel lady, also allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone you wouldn't have,
Yes,
right? So I think that that's an important, it's an important thing to remind oneself of and practice, like you say. Like, a lot of us are very wary of people who are coming to help because you are taught that help is a bad thing to ask for. So
exactly.
right. I want to. You spoke a lot about how your blindness kind of affected a lot of decisions and a lot of that stage of your life. I want to get more into this whole intersection of disability, queerness, and how does that play out for you? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Um, a lot of people make the assumption that I was born blind, and they have no idea that, I had 20/20 vision and I could tell the difference between
Right.
purple and lilac, and I was an artist. I mean, I had some very real skill sets that required vision. So when I became blind, uh, it really opened me up to a world that um, I think I had, and so many of us
Mm,
ignored, and that
mm,
is, people with disabilities. And so I thought about, who in my past did I know who was blind? I remember a boy named Jeff, who was
mm,
a student with me when I was in junior high school, a very proficient, gifted student who was just amazing, who was a blind kid. But outside of Jeff, I don't recall meeting anyone else who was blind, maybe save for some elderly persons with vision issues. And we often equate age with disability, which I think is a bad way to go,
mm,
because
mm,
um, that's not a marriage that is made just because you're old. You're going to have issues with disabilities. So for me, the whole idea of blindness specifically and queerness really rest in helping people think about difference
mm,
as we are talking about different people, LGBTQ people,
mm,
um, the differences that we all share, because I can be in a space that's very queer friendly, but it's not disability friendly. It's very ableist.
mm, mm,
Or they make assumptions and say, well, you don't look blind, you're not blind,
mm,
which really bothers me. I hate when people say that because they don't understand my experience. I would say, well, let's switch optic nerves and you can see what I see or don't see,
mm,
and understand how I walk around in the world. So within those queer communities, I often find that there needs to be so much more education,
mm,
as in the general population, about disabilities.
mm,
But again, it speaks to that whole idea of intersection. You can be a Black person in a white community and understand that they don't know a thing
right,
about diversity. You
right,
can be a woman in a room full of men and know they don't care a darn thing about your gender, and actually they're quite sexist. You
right,
know, you could be a poor person
mm,
with in a class situation with quote unquote upper class people,
right,
and they have no clue about what it took and takes for you to show up in the world. So all of these
mm,
intersections, there are ways in which we need to really challenge the way in which we see other people. And
mm,
so I try to really, as someone who checks a lot of boxes,
mm,
to wherever I stand, to help people think about, well, how do we talk and experience difference? And how do we share space with people who are different from us? And at the same time, make it possible for them to be authentically who they are,
mm.
um, and to celebrate this human diversity that we all carry forth in the world.
I'm just wondering if you were to preach about this, and when I'm saying preach, I envision what they show in Hollywood movies with someone standing on a pulpit and preaching to a crowd. If you had to preach about this concept of sharing space with people who are different, what is it that you would say?
Well, you know, preaching is like prayer.
Hmm.
It can happen in many different ways.
Hmm.
And so I think the best way I preach that message there is when I walk through a crowded mall
Hmm.
and I use my cane, and it's like Moses parting the Red Sea, because people will move, or they're going to get hit by my cane. And then in some spaces, like certain stores, the lighting is just so muted for me
Hmm.
that my cane is not just an accessory, what I mean? Because I can bump into you because I don't see you because of the lighting there.
Hmm.
Uh, and so for me, that is one way I really, quote unquote, preach this idea of sharing space, which means you have to acknowledge that there's someone else in on the path, in the
Hmm.
room, who is different from you, who moves different from you,
Hmm.
who thinks, who experiences life differently than you do. And your ignorance to do that means that there's going to be a collision. And I've
Hmm.
literally had folks walking down the sidewalk with
Hmm.
their phones, looking into their phone, so engaged that they don't see me,
Hmm.
and or even hear my cane, the tapping of my cane,
Hmm.
and they bump into me,
Hmm.
which infuriates me because you're the person who has full vision
Right.
and you're so busy with your phone that you're not paying attention. You're
Hmm.
not sharing space.
Hmm.
You're taking all the space for yourself,
Hmm.
because shared space means that we have to acknowledge each other and how we move down that street.
Hmm.
So that's a physical way for me to preach this whole idea of really what it means to share space.
Does it does it bother you having to explain things like this? Does it does it trouble you, or is it something that is part of the authentic everyday that you practice?
Well, I think sometimes we all get tired of having to teach,
Hmm.
um, regardless of what it is we're having to teach someone else who's not experienced our difference.
Hmm.
Sometimes I get tired of having to teach white people about issues of racism, or
Hmm.
to quote unquote teach people about issues related to heterosexism, or gender issues, or ableism.
Hmm.
Um, and at some point, you have to make the decision that you're not going to teach anymore, or you're going to choose to whom you will teach.
Hmm.
And so for me, I'm at a point of understanding there's some people I just don't have the time and energy to
Hmm.
have that conversation, because I don't feel like it's going to make a difference. But
Hmm.
there's some people who are quite genuine and who do want to know, and who will ask me a question about how I show up in the world. And I will take the time to be in conversation with them.
Hmm.
But there are some other people who make so many assumptions about what my life is like. And because I'm blind, legally blind, I have this or that, blah, 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 blah. And at some point, I don't have the energy. I'm through with teaching. But I want to share, I want to be in communion, in communication with
Hmm.
people who honestly want to know, how do you experience the world, and how can I be better prepared when I
Hmm.
meet someone who is blind? What should I say? What can I ask?
Hmm.
Uh, some people will just come up to me and just make, these or ask these questions like, well, what's wrong with you? Or,
Okay.
how much can you see?
Hmm.
And I'm just meeting you. That's not the appropriate question to ask someone, who has
Right.
a visual impairment.
Hmm.
And so we all, I think, make decisions about how much energy we will give to conversations with people regarding our difference.
Is there a time that you remember where you had this genuine conversation with someone who wanted to learn? And if you could tell us a little about it, of how it went, how do we, my intention is to get all of us to start recognizing these opportunities. So how would I recognize it? So if you could share any example that you have of such a conversation or the situation.
A lot of people come to me, and this is kind of not a specific, but more a category of conversations. A lot of people come to me and they will begin to weed into this question of, I notice you have a white cane. What's your vision like? What can you see? And some people will say, I'm sorry, I don't know if this is offensive, but I want to ask. And then they will later follow it up with, I'm asking because I have a friend who's losing vision, and I just wonder what it's like. Or they'll tell me stories about, my mother is legally blind. And so those are the folks I take a lot more time with, as opposed to the people who say, you don't look blind. How could you tell I was standing in front of you if you're blind? How did you know I just picked up your bag if you're blind? And so those are the people who are really limited and don't understand that 80% of people who are blind see something. 80%. The remaining 20%, 10% of those people may have light perception, so they can see big shapes and things in light. And then maybe only a remaining 10% of people have no light perception, can't see something. So from the jump, most of us are clueless about what blindness is. And so I'm more interested in those people who want to know my experience so they can better help someone they know or love, or who want to make a connection with me because of someone they know who in fact is blind or has some sort of visual impairment. I had an interesting story where I was in interesting situation where I was in the airport once. And I was standing in the middle of the lobby, the waiting area for the plane. And I'm standing there minding my own business, and I have my cane in front of me and I'm holding it. And I could tell this little white boy is circling me. And his name was Liam. I will never forget his name because his parents called his name, 10,000 times. Liam, no, Liam, no, Liam, no. And so he was running up and down through the boarding area, and he came in front of me. He circled, went away, came back, he kicked my cane. And then his dad grabbed him and they scurried off to another side of the waiting area. There was no sense of, oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry. My son kicked your cane. Liam, that was not the appropriate thing to have done. And I was just stunned that this child would think that it was okay for him to do this, and just infuriated that the father would not reprimand him, but just grab him and they run off to some other part of the waiting area. That was something that really bothered me. This whole idea that you are so clueless about how people move in the world, and how my cane really is an extension of my person. It's like someone who's a wheelchair user. You wouldn't just come and lean on that person's wheelchair. You wouldn't lean on someone's cane or crutch or something like that. But we're so clueless about the world in which we inhabit that we really need to stop and to reflect upon the space we share and how people share space differently from us. And that's for all of us.
Thank you for sharing that. wow, I remember having a lot of, like, I teach young children, young people mostly, but children at one point in life. And I remember one of the things a friend of mine who works with disability here was doing is creating coloring sheets that included people with canes, on wheelchairs, with disabilities in different body shapes and types. And I think even something like as basic as that, like just a difference in the way in the coloring sheets you give out in class, uh, is it's just that much is needed. I think there is this massive fear. Like, I'm also thinking of the parents in this situation. There's this massive fear of, oh my God, we have troubled a disabled person. Now, better run before things get weird. And I think this it's just this normalization of, it's okay to allow a mess up to happen,
Yes.
but then address
Yes.
it, and instead of running away.
Well, what's so interesting is that, particularly when I am out and about, and airports do this a lot. I don't know why, but little kids will come up to me and they'll point at my cane, and the parents will be like, "Oh, honey, no, 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 honey, she uses that," or the parents are so embarrassed that the child notices my cane and wants to ask me more about it. And so that's a time when I really am open to engagement, because I know that if I am in conversation with that child at that point, as they grow up, it's not going to be the strange thing to see somebody with a cane. They'll say, "Hey, that was lady in the airport. She had a cane. I remember that lady in the airport, and she talked to me, and she was nice, and yeah, and it's not odd. She told me how the cane was like her eye, and so I'm really open with children, because they are just so genuine, and they want to know, what is that? Why do you use that? What's that for? And the parents are the one who are like, "Honey, no,
That's
leave
rude.
the nice lady alone." And I'm like, "Hey, come on, let's have a conversation. This is my cane. Let's get to know the cane." So yeah, you go from the extremes of Liam, who kicks the cane, and then these other kids who are curious about the cane, and just the joy of being able to share that with those open minds and help shape some of the way in which they experience someone with a disability.
Again, randomly, does your cane have a name? Is naming canes a thing?
Uh, no, naming ukuleles, yes. But not so much canes. It's just my white cane. What I will tell people, because people say, "Well, where's your stick?" I'm like, "It's not a stick. It's a cane." um, but it's one of those things that I know is essential for me. Now, I can be in a place where I'm very, very familiar with the street. I can walk down my street in my neighborhood, and I know there's a part in the sidewalk where there's an indentation because the water meter cover is there. I know that there's a place where I have to be careful because the cement may be cracked. I know that. Sometimes I know that because I've felt it, because I've tripped over it. But I say that to say there's some spaces that I'm very familiar with, and I don't necessarily use my cane every day if I'm walking my dog down the street. But I know there have been times when, if I did not have that cane, I would be on the ground. And I remember walking, I was at lunch when I worked at the Center for the Visually Impaired here in Atlanta. And when you came through the back of the building and went on the other side of the street, there are these set of steps. And sun has a way of taking my clarity. It really obscures my vision even more than what it is. And so I was walking using I was approaching the stairs, but I did not know that I was approaching the stairs. They're tricky kind of stairs. And it just so happened that my cane caught the first stair, and I was able to redirect myself. Now, there are people around me, and I could tell that they got quiet because they saw me, and I wasn't fully aware of the stairs. but no one said, "Hey, lady." you know so at times like that, I'm just very grateful for my cane, because
Mm,
there is a technique, there is a sense of how this cane really helps you move in your space,
mm,
that is kind of hard to describe to people if you don't use it. How it's connected to the earth, and
mm.
how if you tap and you feel like there's an indention, you better pay attention, because you may be going off a ledge or a step or something like that.
Hmm.
So, no names, but it certainly is a friend of mine.
Uh, so no names for the cane, but names for the ukuleles. That's right.
Yes.
Tell us about your ukulele children.
Well, I have so many children, I probably need to think of giving some of them to other good homes. But who does that with their children, right? You keep your children, you care for them, even though it takes so much time and energy, and they have to be watered and cared for, and all this humidified, all this other stuff. And I probably have 20 or so ukuleles. And that is not as many as some folks have, and it's more than some folks have. But I enjoy the different sizes, the different tone woods that maybe you can get from spruce, or you hear it in mahogany, or you hear it
Mm,
in cedar. I have a pear wood ukulele that I really love. So I mean, I have these different sizes, these different woods, these different shapes, and um, it really is about what the pianist Oscar Peterson once said. He said, "You have to negotiate your instrument." And so for me, that's being in communication with these ukuleles that I understand. Ooh, I want to play this one today because this is the sound I'm looking for. So it's
right.
not that I have them and I'm just hoarding them. I'm at the place now where, with a few exceptions, I probably don't need any more ukuleles, because I have within my collection that which I really desire.
Right.
I have one called Mahalia, after Mahalia Jackson, uh,
Nice.
because she has this just this beautiful sound. And I was playing her at a Ook Fest in Maryland once, and someone said, "What is that ukulele you're playing? I can just hear it.
Mm.
Just a very rich, dynamic, bold sound." My first ukulele was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and I named it after Rosetta Tharpe, the great musician and singer, because she was an acoustic electric ukulele, so I could plug her in and just go with her. Um, so I have all of these incredible ukuleles. Not all of them have names, but some of them do, and it's just a joy to see how this little sound box with four strings can make a world of difference in terms of bringing life to space with music.
And you're doing, because I don't know what the lockdown levels are at your end, but you are doing a lot of this community ukulele work online now, aren't you?
Yes, we're doing it all online. And a large part of that is because I have students in California, in Oregon, in Florida, in Georgia,
Wow.
all over. And so it really is a wonderful opportunity to connect with people all across the United States, and to continue the work we're doing with ZAMI NOBLA's community music education program.
And people can find out more about this education program on the ZAMI NOBLA website.
Yes,
Yes.
zaminobla.org. Yes.
Yes. And is there a different website for Uke Griot? I tried looking, but I only found the
I
SoundCloud.
do have Ukegriot as
Oh, okay.
UKEGR, Ukegriot, UKEGRIOT.com. Um, and it tells a little bit more about me and my journey, and there's some clips to some videos that I've done. So that's there, and folks can contact me via that website.
Right. Uh, I'm sorry, I just concentrated on the riot part and stuck to that while pronouncing the word.
That's fine.
um, I want to take I don't know why I keep saying I want to take moments, but why not? I could take moments. Is there something I should have asked you that I didn't know to ask?
Um, no, I think that, this has been a great conversation. And I just enjoyed, having the chance to reflect upon my life, my work, and I think that's the joy of doing the work that we each do in terms of podcasting,
Right.
um, is helping people kind of reflect upon their life, and maybe that's what I would add, the fact that I do the ZAMI NOBLA podcast,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I've been doing that for 3 years, and it's a joy being able to capture
Hmm.
these stories of women who share their wit and wisdom with
Hmm.
me, and we have just a wonderful archive. So I think that's something else I would add in, as
Hmm.
the work I do in the world, it's not just about the music piece, it's the podcasting piece, it's the
Hmm.
graphic design piece that I do, it's the
Hmm.
preaching piece, it's the writing piece, and just trying to find space in my life for all of these things that I do, and the ways in which I show up in the world.
Hmm. Is there something specific that, like, I'm assuming that a lot of people who will listen to this at my end will have no idea what you do unless they look at the links. Is there something specific that you want everyone to know about you?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I just I think it may be good for people to know that I'm in process.
Hmm.
I think one of the things music has made me understand is I don't have to be perfect.
Hmm.
I just have to be committed.
Hmm.
And that helps me as I understand that I am and we all are, souls in process.
Hmm.
I am continually working every day to become a better musician, a better teacher, a better writer, a better preacher, a better podcaster, a better graphic designer. I mean, every day I'm in process. And so I think when I move out in the world that way and give other people that same grace, then when we make mistakes, it's a lot easier to extend grace and mercy,
Hmm.
because you understand that we all are in process, and every day we have an opportunity to learn more, to do more, to practice more,
Hmm.
in order to really live out our true commitment to being fully authentic in the world.
Thank you. That I think that kind of rounds up what we have been talking about today. I also want to take a moment to point out that whatever good practices you see in this podcast have come to me directly from Angela. So she's a little bit of a podcast mentor for me. So thank you for that. Thank you for having
Uh,
this conversation. One last thing before we sign off, me for the night and you for the day. Uh, I mentioned this provocation or prompt that we request at the end of the podcast is something that we put out to whoever's listening, reading, watching, and hopefully they will respond. That is the hope, that is the desire. So, is there a prompt or a provocation that you have for us?
I would challenge people to find space in their day. No more, as a beginner, no more than 3 minutes, just to sit
Hmm.
and to be present and to breathe
Right.
and to allow yourself to enjoy and experience that space. And if you feel distracted, just come back to that space without judgment of your lapse, but just be present 3 minutes for that day. And if you can develop that practice to see what a difference it makes. That's the thing that's most amazed me in life, is that when we just take small steps like that, it doesn't have to be 3 hours, but just even at the top of our day, or making some time in our day for those 3 minutes of space, and develop of that to see how it can challenge and transform one's life.
Brilliant. That is a great place to start out. It is a great challenge to throw out. Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, I really don't have words. I'll probably send you an email with greater words of gratitude. But thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Thank you so much for being so gracious and helpful about everything. Have a great day, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Hannah. It's been my pleasure, and just many, many good thoughts and wishes on this journey of this wonderful work that you are initiating in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.